Hello everyone! I absolutely adore original characters. Creating and designing them, plotting up the world and story, it's just a lot of fun. I've been developing a story with my own OCs for quite a while now. These guys are always on my mind. So much that I write out an over 80,000 word plot outline, including the story, the world building, and the character lore. Anyway, since I love OCs, I thought it would be a fun idea to draw out some of your characters that are submitted to me via email, as I feel like original characters need more appreciation sometimes. As when you think about it, every piece of fiction that you have ever loved, the characters are just the creator's OCs, which is very fascinating to me. Anyway, before I ramble too much, the first character today is called Brenner. I hope I'm saying that right, by Harper Glitterheart. Brenner is a character who often ignores his own feelings a lot, and has quite an uncaring look. He likes being alone, eating pizza, drinking lava, the night sky, shape-shifting, and gaining any type of power. And he dislikes closed spaces, being summoned when busy, and being restrained. And his hobby is crafting. With some of the key information about the character, let's get drawing! Since it's mentioned that Brenner likes the night sky, I thought it would be a cool concept to draw him standing on the grassy hill at nightfall, with the full moon behind him. I thought since his colour palette contains a lot of warm colours such as red and brown, Brenner standing amongst the night sky, which has a lot of cool colours, would contrast nicely. I can't think of anything that I had too much trouble with while drawing this piece. Maybe Brenner's horns, and probably the wings too, as I don't draw wings too often. Well, here's a little story. For art school, I had to animate a bird flying, and the first attempt, which was just me using my imagination alone, looked really bad and stiff. So with that failure in mind, I decided to draw some bird studies, and once I tried to reanimate the scene of the bird flying, my second attempt was much better. I learned while animating that scene that it's always important to do some research, as just because you have an idea in your head of how something moves, it's always better to always look at references anyway and break down the anatomy of whatever you're animating, so you can understand it better. Drawing Brenner's wings really brought me back to this moment. No matter what point of your artistic journey that you're in, the learning never stops. Wings are still a little bit of a struggle for me, however I gotta improve, as I have a character in my passion project I'm developing whose power is that they have these big wings. Also, while we're on the topic of Brenner's wings, I drew them with a white coloured brush with a black stroke layer style to make my life a little easier. I also use this method on their tail as well to keep the width consistent. It's always interesting drawing characters you aren't familiar with, as I feel like if you draw the same characters over and over, it becomes almost second nature at a point, as you have their design completely memorized in your head. However, when drawing other people's characters, you notice details that make you go, oh, that's such a cool design choice, and you pick up on these little details that you wouldn't have thought of before. Like in Brenner's case, the pointy fingertips, the multiple eyes, and his double ears. Even the gradient on his hair. As I tend to design my characters with animation purposes in mind, which in other words is to just keep things very simple. For an example, all their colours are solid, which you can see in Cassidy's hair here for an example. Before I got really obsessed with animation, I used to add gradient hair, but again, rarely for animation, which is such a shame as gradient hair looks so cool. I know in anime, sorry I'm going a little bit off topic, but I was watching a behind-the-scenes documentary of Dr. Stone, and the main character, Senku, who has very unique hair, he has this green gradient on his hair, and it turns out that when they draw his hair, I feel like I'm saying hair a lot here, they draw his hair as solid colours with colour separation lines. Then when it comes to compositing, they will blur it out to give it that gradient look. And that is really fascinating. I really want to animate a character with gradient hair now. Since Brenner likes pizza and drinking lava, I thought I would add that into the piece. Maybe he's just sitting alone admiring the night sky or something. Also, adding the lighting was a lot of fun. Since his eyes are red, the blue makes this really pop. I also added some additional blue lighting to add some form. I thought I would give the moon this red glow. I was inspired by a blood moon, but the moon itself isn't red in this piece, but I really like how the red glow adds some colour contrast. Also, I gave myself a soft deadline with around 1 hour to work on this, but I think I spent nearly 2 hours as I just had so much fun working on this piece. And here is the first illustration complete. I hope you like how Brenner turned out. I had so much fun drawing them. Our next character today is Alice Co by Bowler Pear. Alice is 20 years old and a law student, although she's retaking her first year. Alice likes dating, writing, pop songs, and she dislikes serial killers. For the illustration of Alice, I thought it would be a great idea to have her sitting at a cafe on her laptop while she listens to music. For the background, to help me out as my time was very limited working on these illustrations unfortunately, I brought in a screenshot of a cafe 3D model I made in Blender, from my own OC project, just to help me out with the perspective of this scene. I wanted to have Alice sit by a window as I thought the lighting would be really cool, but then I realised I would have to paint out a street. So I did. Last year especially, I worked on developing backgrounds a little more for my own projects, so I wanted to push myself here a little and paint some buildings, even if I kept it a little simple for the rendering, as this was going to be blurred out in the final illustration, as I didn't want to take away the focus from Alice herself. Also, can I say that this has been the happiest I've felt creating art in quite a while. For those who don't know, I kind of got really burnt out due to the aftermath of one of my animation projects in late 2025. Where I barely drew anything at all for a couple of months, and part of me wanted to give up art altogether. After taking some time away and setting some goals where 2026 isn't going to be a year where I have a resolution to obtain these unrealistic goals, and if I don't maintain it for a single day, I've failed the resolution. 2026 is instead a start in the right direction of knowing my struggles and making a start to try and avoid things like burnout from happening again. And if I so happen to create bigger projects along the way thanks to these goals I've set for myself, then that's great. And so far, I think doing stuff like setting a schedule for myself as a rough idea of how I want my day to play out has been really good, as I genuinely feel extremely happy creating again. Like struggling to sleep at night because I'm so passionate about my projects instead of stressing about them, and I just want to keep working on them all the time. And I haven't felt like that in a while. Like, I've been such a perfectionist of my projects and it just paralyzes me with stress and I can't work on anything. Which is basically what I was going through every time I tried to draw during my burnout. However, I'm glad to say I've managed to stop feeling like everything I make has to be perfect, and just enjoy the process of creating. For an example, setting soft deadlines for myself has helped wonders, and I've been getting a lot of support on here lately. And part of that being because I'm not happy to create again, I'm just creating overall a lot more consistently. Like, I don't think I felt this happy creating art probably since late 2022 and 2023. That era I deeply missed in my creative journey, back when I didn't put as much pressure on myself, and just have fun creating regardless of the outcome. During 2026, I want to try and maintain this joy I have towards art. Back on topic here as I realised I rambled a little bit. I really like Alice's design. She looks like such a fun and bubbly character, and I like her colour scheme with all the pink. So I wanted the cafe background to contrast her with greens, whites, and blues. I also added in a little purple as I thought that looked nice. This illustration didn't give me too much trouble, except for the fact that I forgot to add her earphones in, as Alice was meant to listen to music in this illustration, while working on our laptop. For the earphones, if you're wondering how I draw them when you see them in the final illustration, I use the outline layer style to give the line that black border effect, just to keep the line width consistent. Also, here's a little fun fact. For the longest time, I had no idea that Krita even had layer styles in the program. I remember how Clip Studio Paint had the border effect tool, where when you draw with it enabled, it will automatically add an outline. I remember wishing that Krita did the same, as to create an outline in Krita, I used to select the colour on that layer, expand the growth by a couple of pixels, then create a new layer underneath and fill it in black. And this is what I did to create simple outlines and borders, until I was at college last year, and in one of our classes we got taught about Photoshop, and I had used Photoshop before, but in that class layer styles got mentioned, and I thought it was so cool. Also, I just realised some of you may not know what a layer style is. Basically, it's a way to add effects to that specific layer. Like you draw and there's a stroke button which when enabled will add an outline in the colour of your choice around anything in that layer. You can also add a drop shadow which works the same way, or an inner shadow which you can change some of the settings to add rim lighting. I remember once I figured out Krita had a layer styles menu like in Photoshop, I was so happy, as it would make my life so much easier. As Krita basically has the Clip Studio Paint border tool, and I can add rim lighting to my animations, like how you can add it in After Effects. Before I knew about the layer styles, I used to select the silhouette of the character and expand the selection to fill in a rim of color clipped to the characters, frame by frame. Then I would also erase this each frame where I didn't want the rim of color to hit the character. Like for Sonic in this Twitter takeover animation, I would erase under his spines, which was a lot of work. And then I realized this entire time Krita had the function to add rim lighting, to basically give the exact same effect, just much quicker. It was such an eye-opener for me, and I was so overjoyed once I figured it out. Speaking of lighting, I had so much fun with the lighting in Alice's piece. I'm starting to think lighting is one of my favourite parts of both animation and illustration. I really wanted Alice and the cafe's interior to be a little dark, which will really emphasize the lighting coming in from the window, and I think the end result looks really cool. For most of the lighting, I would use the lasso select tool and the gradient tool, or the airbrush, to add in some soft lighting. Then I would use Krita's blur brush to soften some of the edges. This is a super quick and fun way to add lighting to characters, and here is the final illustration of Alice. I hope you like it. I'm really happy with the results of both of these illustrations. Sadly, this is all the time I have for today. I really wanted to add a third illustration, however unfortunately I ran out of time. However, if you all really like this sort of video, then maybe I'll create a sequel. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time.